They said our love wouldn't last, that we'd regret crossing the color line. 6 years later, our mixed-race family is thriving despite the stares, the whispers, and the unsolicited opinions. This is my story of finding love that was worth every battle we fought. They said our love wouldn't last, that we'd regret crossing the color line. 6 years later, our mixed-race family is thriving despite the stares, the whispers, and the unsolicited opinions. This is my story of finding love that was worth every battle we fought. Hey there, I'm Michael, 34, born and raised in a small town in Ohio where diversity wasn't exactly the norm. Middle-class family, state college education, office job in marketing, pretty standard stuff. Nothing in my upbringing prepared me for how my life would change the day I met Zara. If you've ever felt judged for who you love, if you've ever had someone look at your relationship with disapproval in their eyes, this story might give you the courage to follow your heart. Because despite everything I'm about to tell you, I wouldn't change a single moment of our journey. It started 3 summers ago at a friend's barbecue. I wasn't even supposed to be there. Had to cancel other plans last minute. But there she was, laughing by the grill, this stunning woman with eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. Politics, music, our shared love of old bookstores and terrible sci-fi movies. I drove home that night, knowing something significant had just happened, even if I couldn't name it yet. What I didn't expect was the text from my buddy the next morning. "Dude, you know she's not really your type, right?" A polite warning, the first of many, my parents' uncomfortable silence when I mentioned her name. My sister's worried glance when I showed her Zara's picture. My co-worker's raised eyebrow when we had lunch together in the office cafeteria. The whispers, the stares, the questions that weren't really questions but judgments dressed in concern. Have you really thought this through? I hadn't realized how deeply certain expectations had been embedded in my world until I found myself challenging them. By simply following my heart, I had inadvertently stepped into a battlefield I never knew existed. But that's getting ahead of the story. Let me take you back to the beginning, before Zara, before my eyes were opened, before I discovered exactly what I was willing to fight for. Looking back, my life before Zara seems almost like someone else's story now. I dated women my parents would describe as nice girls, mostly white, mostly from similar backgrounds. It wasn't a conscious choice, it was just the water I swam in. My hometown was about as diverse as a loaf of white bread, and my parents' social circle reflected that sameness. My dad would occasionally make comments that would make me cringe. Not outright racist things, but those subtle jabs wrapped in supposed humor. "Just joking around," he'd say if anyone looked uncomfortable. My mom would sometimes talk about her co-workers' exotic features as though she were describing a vacation destination rather than a person. I absorbed these perspectives without realizing it. When my college roommate started dating a black woman, I remember feeling surprised, not disapproving, just surprised. I never questioned why I felt that way. That's the thing about biases. They're invisible until something forces you to see them. I had this idea of who I'd end up with, someone who'd fit seamlessly into family holidays, who wouldn't complicate things. It sounds so shallow now, but I never had to confront those thoughts. I was coasting along, following an unwritten script for my life. My last relationship before Zara lasted 3 years. We looked good together on paper, shared the same friend group, had similar taste in music and movies. But there was always something missing, a depth of connection, a feeling of truly being seen. When we broke up, it was mutual and painless, like closing a book you were only mildly interested in. That barbecue where I met Zara wasn't supposed to be anything special. My buddy Alex had just bought a house, and this was his housewarming. I almost didn't go, had tickets to a baseball game, but my friend bailed last minute. Funny how the biggest moments in your life often happen by chance. Zara wasn't what people typically call shy, but she wasn't the center of attention either. She had this quiet confidence, this way of listening that made you feel like your words actually mattered. When she laughed, it was genuine, not that polite laugh people use in social settings. I noticed her immediately. We ended up talking by the drinks table. She was a friend of Alex's girlfriend from grad school, an art therapist working with kids who'd experienced trauma. The way she spoke about her work, with such passion and purpose, I was captivated, not just by her beauty, though with those deep brown eyes and smile that lit up her whole face, she was stunning, but by her mind, her heart. We talked about everything that night. Books we loved, places we'd traveled, our families, our dreams. There was none of that first meeting awkwardness. Hours passed like minutes. When she mentioned growing up in Chicago as one of few black families in her neighborhood, I found myself sharing things about my own upbringing I'd never articulated before. When we exchanged numbers at the end of the night, my hands were actually shaking. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition, like finding a piece of yourself in another person. I drove home knowing something fundamental had shifted in my world. The first hint of trouble came from Alex, the same friend whose barbecue had brought us together. "Just looking out for you, man," he said over beers one night. "You know how complicated these things can get." These things. As if what Zara and I were building was some kind of social experiment rather than two people falling in love. My parents were worse. When I first showed them Zara's picture, my mum's smile tightened into something that wasn't quite a smile anymore. "She seems interesting," she said, in that tone mothers perfect for expressing disapproval without saying anything explicitly wrong. My dad was more direct. "You're making life harder than it needs to be, son." At work, it was the subtle things. The raised eyebrows when Zara picked me up for lunch. The way conversations would sometimes pause when we walked into a restaurant together. The coworker who asked if my parents were okay with it, as if I was 16 instead of 31. Zara noticed everything. She had to. She'd been navigating these waters her entire life, reading rooms, gauging reactions, determining whether spaces were safe. What was new and shocking to me was her daily reality. "Do you really want to deal with this forever?" she asked me once, after a particularly uncomfortable dinner with my college friends. Her voice was steady, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. She wasn't testing me, she was giving me an out. That night was our first real fight. Not because of anything between us, but because the world had started to wedge itself into our relationship, and we were still learning how to stand together against it. 6 months into our relationship, Zara and I sat on her apartment balcony, sharing a bottle of wine under string lights. We'd just come from a dinner where the waitress had assumed we weren't together, repeatedly asking if the checks would be separate. A small thing, really, but they add up. "We need to talk about what we're doing here," Zara said, her voice quiet but determined. "About whether this is worth it for you." She told me about her last relationship with a white man, how it had crumbled under the weight of these exact pressures, how he'd eventually admitted he couldn't handle the constant judgment, the family tensions, the stares. I felt a flash of anger, not at her, but at the unfairness of it all, that she had to question whether someone could love her enough to weather these storms, that she had to offer me an escape route because society had taught her that her love came with a price. "I'm not going anywhere," I told her, taking her hands in mine, "unless you want me to." And I meant it. In that moment, I understood that loving Zara meant committing not just to her, but to standing against every raised eyebrow, every disapproving glance, every well-meaning warning. She studied my face in that intense way she had, searching for doubt. "This won't get easier," she said. "My blackness isn't something that fades into the background over time." "I don't want it to," I replied. "I love you, all of you. The world can adjust or get out of our way." We made a promise that night, to choose each other, every day, no matter what came our way, to build something stronger than the forces trying to pull us apart. The real test came during Thanksgiving the following year. After much deliberation, we decided to spend it with my family. Zara was nervous. She'd met my parents twice before, brief encounters where everyone maintained a thin veneer of politeness. This would be 3 full days in their home. The first night was tense but manageable. My mum made an effort, asking Zara about her work, though her questions had an anthropological quality to them. My dad retreated behind his newspaper, engaging minimally. My sister Kate was the only one who seemed genuinely warm. The breaking point came during dinner on the second day, when my Uncle Dave started talking politics. He'd always been the family's provocateur, but that day, he seemed determined to push boundaries. He made comments about problems in the inner city while looking directly at Zara. When he used the phrase, "those people," I felt Zara stiffen beside me. I should have shut it down immediately. Instead, I tried to change the subject, hoping to avoid conflict. My cowardice in that moment still haunts me. Zara excused herself from the table and went upstairs. When I found her packing her bag, the disappointment in her eyes cut deeper than anger would have. "I can handle the ignorance," she said quietly. "What I can't handle is watching you choose peace with them over respect for me." She was right. In trying not to rock the boat, I'd let her drown. She left that night, catching a ride to the train station with Kate. I stayed behind to have the confrontation I should have had at the dinner table. The argument with my family was explosive, years of unspoken tensions erupting at once. I left the next morning, uncertain if either relationship could be repaired. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. Zara and I barely spoke. When we did, our conversations were heavy with pain and uncertainty. There were moments I wondered if love really was enough, if we were fighting a battle we couldn't win. She called me a tourist in her reality during one particularly raw conversation, someone who could always retreat to the safety of my privilege when things got too difficult. Those words forced me to confront truths about myself I'd been avoiding, about the luxury of my ignorance before her, about how much I still had to learn and unlearn. The path back to each other wasn't straightforward. It began with my sister Kate showing up at my apartment one rainy Sunday afternoon. She'd driven 2 hours to deliver what she called a reality check. "You've got 2 choices," she said, sitting across from me at my kitchen table. "You can let fear win, or you can fight for the woman you love." Kate had always been the family rebel, but I never expected her to become our fiercest advocate. She'd been texting with Zara, she told me. Had taken her to lunch, listened to her perspective. "Do you have any idea how much courage it takes for her to love you? To open herself up to our family's judgment? To navigate spaces where she's constantly othered?" Kate's words hit me like a physical force. She was right. While I'd been feeling sorry for myself, mourning the family harmony that had been disrupted, Zara had been carrying the heavier burden. Always. That conversation became the first domino in a series of changes. I started reaching out to other interracial couples, listening to their stories, learning from their journeys. I found online communities, read books, educated myself on the history and realities of what we were facing. Not to burden Zara with fixing me, but to show up as a partner who understood. Most importantly, I started therapy with a counselor who specialized in racial identity and relationships. She helped me untangle my own biases, confront uncomfortable truths about my upbringing, and develop tools for navigating family dynamics. 3 weeks after Kate's visit, I asked Zara if we could talk. We met at a neutral place, a quiet corner of the botanical gardens she loved. I didn't make excuses or beg forgiveness. Instead, I acknowledged my failures, shared what I'd been learning, and asked if she was willing to rebuild, not just what we had before, but something stronger. "I can't promise I'll get it right every time," I told her, "but I can promise you'll never stand alone again." She was cautious, and rightfully so, but she was also still in love, as I was. "Actions, not words," she said. It wasn't a yes exactly, but it was a door left open. a chance I was determined not to waste. Rebuilding took time. We started slowly, coffee dates, honest conversations, a gradual return to the easy laughter we'd once shared. But things were different now. Better in many ways. More real. The foundation we laid this time wasn't built on the fantasy that love alone could shield us from the world's ugliness, but on the commitment to face that ugliness together. Our life together began to take shape around new traditions. On Sunday mornings, Zara taught me to make her grandmother's jollof rice, while I introduced her to my dad's old vinyl collection. We celebrated Juneteenth with her family and Christmas with mine. We found ways to blend our worlds, rather than asking either of us to abandon parts of ourselves. My parents' journey was complicated. My mum made the effort first, inviting Zara for lunch, asking sincere questions about her life, her family history. There were awkward moments, but the genuine attempt meant everything. My dad took longer. His breakthrough came when he needed emergency surgery, and Zara, who'd experienced medical racism in her own family, helped navigate the hospital system to ensure he received proper care. She fought for me, he told me later in recovery, his voice thick with emotion. Moving in together was a milestone that came with its own challenges. Deciding where to live wasn't just about commute times and apartment features. It was about finding a community where we both felt safe and welcomed. We compromised on a diverse neighborhood halfway between our workplaces, somewhere our future children could see families that looked like theirs. Those children arrived sooner than we'd planned. When Zara told me she was pregnant, just a year after we'd reconciled, fear and joy collided within me. I thought about what our child would face in this world, the assumptions, the questions about belonging, the need to navigate multiple identities. But I also thought about the richness of the heritage we'd passed down, the strength our child would inherit from parents who had fought for their love. The day Amara was born, her skin a perfect blend of her mother's rich brown and my olive tone, her eyes with Zara's depth and shape, I understood completely what we'd been fighting for. Not just our right to love each other, but our right to create something new together, something that transcended the categories the world tried to force us into. 6 years since that barbecue where our eyes first met. 3 years since we said "I do" in a ceremony that blended both our traditions. 2 years since Amara came into our world, and 6 months since we welcomed her little brother, Miles. The journey hasn't been easy. There are still family gatherings where tensions simmer beneath the surface. Still strangers who look at our children with confusion, trying to place them in neat racial boxes. Still moments when the weight of being a mixed family in a divided world feels overwhelming. But for every challenge, there have been 100 joys. The richness of raising children fluent in multiple cultural languages. The beauty of holiday tables, where different traditions mingle. The depth that comes from loving someone whose experience of the world differs from your own. I'm not going to pretend I've gotten everything right. I make mistakes. I'm still learning, still growing. What I know for certain is this. Every warning I received about loving Zara came from fear. Fear of difference, fear of complexity, fear of change. Love demanded courage instead. The courage to question what I'd been taught. The courage to stand firm when it would have been easier to walk away. The courage to build a family that doesn't fit neatly into society's categories. And every single day, I'm thankful I found that courage. Thankful I chose love over fear. Because on the other side of that choice was everything that matters. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that love conquers prejudice. Subscribe for more real stories about relationships that break barriers. Remember, the right person is worth fighting for, no matter what the world says.